Testing. Back for season 2. This is very exciting. I am this awkwardly timed because I'm a bit hungry right now. You know what? We're going to have breakfast first and then we are going to try this again. Because we do that. We eat breakfast now. And through the magic of podcasting, we are back from breakfast and ready to start season 2. Welcome back to anybody that is a new listener. I'm so happy to have you and welcome to the Uncovery podcast. If you don't know me, my name is Maddie Quinlan and I've had anorexia for about 11 years, I would say, but who really knows when these things first are considered an eating disorder or not. But I've been in recovery for on and off a few years. I've really doubled down and been doing really strong recovery since about October of last year, which is about coming on 10 months. So that's a little bit about me. I talk about it on this podcast. I interview experts and people with experience with eating disorders in order to open up these conversations and talk more openly about not just eating disorders, but disordered eating of different kinds, body image, information about mental health. And I'm just so excited to be back for season 2. If you are not new and you've been here the whole time, welcome back. And I'm really happy to have you all here. So today, I feel like there's so much to say because we've had this little summer break, but I'm basically going to give you a little update and tell you what my eating disorder did on summer vacation. All right, so I took this break. I was realizing that the state that I was in and the things that I was trying to juggle, something was going to slip, something was going to give, and there are some non-negotiables that are in my life and in many of our lives where number one was recovery for me. And although this is such an integral part and such a support of my recovery, it is also energetically taxing to a certain degree where putting out episodes and recording and getting guests and doing all of the things that require, pieces of my brain. It was getting to be a lot with having to keep up with my recovery resources and also to be running my business, which is unfortunately not negotiable either because I gotta live. I gotta afford all this food that I'm eating. So I needed sort of the summer to take a little break, and I was still, recording here and there, but not being pressed to sort of get stuff out every week. And maybe it's the perfectionism in me that I don't want to put stuff out that I'm not excited about. I don't want this to feel like a chore. I want this to be inspired and helpful to both you and to me. So that was sort of the reason for the break, was just something had to give for a little while I got through this period of time that was quite taxing. So things have been really improving and getting better in a lot of ways. I've experienced a lot of changes just in these months. And part of me is a little bit pissed off that I wasn't recording this whole time because some of the greatest physiological changes have been happening in these past several months. To me, it's always kind of seemed that it goes, little by little by little, and then a bit of a whoosh in terms of the turnover of the body stuff. And that's been incredibly uncomfortable, but also very important. And it's really nice, I think, now to be able to even reflect back a few months and just see how different things are from when I first started the podcast, but also even from when I started kind of taking that little break. I reached a point in the spring where I was so desperate for my energy to come back. I hadn't experienced before in previous sort of iterations of recovery and weight gain this really, really slow, debilitating exhaustion period of recovery. I was tired from January pretty much to June. And it sounds like an exaggeration, but I was exhausted. I had to plan my days so that I had a few good hours in the mornings where I'd be able to work, get things done, record, whatever it was that absolutely needed to get done in my life, because I was never ever sure if I would have any energy for most of the afternoon and evening. And that was the reality of my existence for months and months and months. And I kept waiting for a turn. I kept waiting for the lights to start coming back on because I was so tired of living like that. And I felt like I was working so hard in recovery and I was eating so much more food. I was like, why is it not giving me more energy? Is this not the point? Is this not the point? And, wanting things to happen relatively quickly. I'm not known for my patience. So it really, really forced me to embrace rest, embrace patience, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other recovery-wise until things started to change. And then just have faith. And so much of this recovery process for me has just been blind faith that there's another side and that it's going to get better. I have to believe that. I have to believe that full recovery is possible for me, because otherwise, what's the point in doing all the things that I have to do that are really hard for me? So I'm going on blind faith. I've been going on blind faith, and I'm starting to now feel over these last few months that shift. There came a point in the spring, sort of as the sun was coming out, I had a friend sort of say like, oh, flowers start blooming. Maddie started blooming. It's like my energy really started to come back gradually where, I at a certain point, I could not make plans. I couldn't make especially evening plans because I had no idea when I was going to be too tired or just not feeling up to it. And I hate to cancel plans, so I'd rather not make them in the first place. So it resulted in me not planning very much and not doing very much socially. And then I started to feel this little inclination, this little tug, and a little bit more energy day after day where I was excited to do stuff again. I was excited to go out again, and the sun started staying up. And I didn't feel like I needed to be in bed at 8 o'clock because I was just so tired by then. And so I really started to feel that shift. I saw friends that I hadn't seen in, months, some in years. And a part of that has felt a little bit like an apology tour. Everybody that I'm seeing recently that I didn't see for months and months, I sort of lead with, hey, I've been meaning to reach out. I really did want to hang out. I really did want to do this. I physically couldn't. I was strapped. I was so strapped. So it's felt like a bit of an apology tour. And of course, everyone is extremely gracious and they understand because they're brilliant and wonderful and supportive and loving. But I still feel that little nagging guilt of I could barely have the energy to text back, much less go for drinks. So that started to shift coming into sort of the spring and summer, and I was able to do more. And along with that came physical changes. And that obviously goes hand in hand because now, your body has more to output because there's more that's being input, and pushing through food fears and, amounts of food and just getting out of energy deficit, essentially. It took me until I was at, to me, a very scary amount of food and calories in a day before I started to see that shift. And to me, that's the proof. That's the proof that this is absolutely necessary to be eating adequately, because none of this lights coming on, blooming, feeling energetic, none of that happened until I was really having adequate nutrition. And there's just no way around that. I've spent over a decade seeking an appetite suppressant that would work, seeking something that would allow me to not feel hungry anymore. And I tried everything. I would try different diets. I would try different foods, all of these different really disordered ways of trying to suppress my internal hunger. And it turns out I figured out what it was, the ultimate appetite suppressant. It's food. If you eat food, you're not hungry anymore. And then you have energy and you can go about your life without thinking about food. This holy grail, the thing that I kept trying to find to suppress my hunger and suppress my weight and get through it. That ain't it. It's literally just food. So surprise to me. And and probably surprise level 0 to anyone else. But it's these really straightforward things that become so clear the further along that I kind of go. So all that said, the physical changes that I was sort of experiencing simultaneously with all of this energy that was coming back, it was coming from somewhere. I've had to contend with a changing body. And in some ways, I've been surprised at my ability to embrace parts of it. But I've been also disappointed to find that the body image piece doesn't come immediately. So the way that I've been visualizing it is in terms of trade-offs. So what's the cost of this full life that I can have now and that I'm building now and that I'm uncovering now? The cost of that is the impossibly unsustainable thin body, the flat stomach, the thigh gap, whatever it is. It will cost me my old life to have my new one. And if having a tummy is what I pay for all of these other things, I mean, I can hardly say it out loud without sounding like a crazy person, but that seems worth it. That seems worth it to have the rest of my life bloom more and more. And okay, well, it comes along with a tummy that I'm just not crazy about. Maybe I'll be crazy about it later. Maybe I never will be. Maybe I'll just learn to not care about it and things like it. But that seems worth it to me. And so that's the way that I've had to visualize it in terms of a trade-off. Because no sensible person would not make that trade. And I'm trying to be rational about this. I'm trying to say this is worth it. Keep going. So I've discovered new things about clothes. I've been forced to dress in a new body, and I'm going to have an entire episode about clothes because it's a huge piece of my own eating disorder. And I think a lot of people really struggle with how do clothes fit? How do clothes look? What are clothes meant to do? And so that's been an experience, is getting rid of clothes and not really being sure when to get new clothes, because even though I've gone through all of this transformation, I'm still not sure if I'm quote unquote done. Like, are we ever done? Are we ever fully, like, who knows? The body is always going to be changing, but I do know that there's a reason to believe that there's going to be some sort of set point where things just sort of settle out. And being the practical person that I like to be, or that I would like to be, I'd hate to buy a whole new wardrobe in the middle of it and then have to do it again. So I'm trying to sort of navigate the mucky middle of recovery, not just in terms of clothes and body, but overall. I feel very much in the middle. As I mentioned, I'm not so hungry anymore. I'm not thinking about food 24 hours a day. And as a result of that, it becomes more clear to me when I am hungry, when I am thinking about food. I notice really, really quickly, and usually before I even feel, sort of physical, tummy grumbling hunger, the first thing that I'll notice is that I'm just not as pleased about life. I'm just a little bit edgier, feeling a little bit less patient, feeling just less excited about anything that's happening. And so I get quiet first. That's probably the first thing that happens, is that I get a bit quiet. And then when I realize that, I'm like, oh, those are the beginnings of hunger for me. But now having a baseline that isn't always hangry and awful and feeling anxious, it means that when it does change, when I do feel hunger, it means that I notice it more quickly. And it's the same thing with feelings of anxiety. If your baseline is just less stressed and you're just better off psychologically, feeling well, then any sort of incoming negative emotion is much more easily identified because you're not constantly in that state. So it's similar to that. My routine and my meal plan is working really well for me. I'm still rather structured in the amount of times that I'm eating in the day, at the times, ideally, that I'm eating in the day. There's a little bit more flexibility than there was because I'm now just focused on you must at least meet this sort of baseline nutritionally. And that helps to be able to sort of move things around and live life a little bit more freely. But I do always kind of come back to my meal plan and the routine, because that the body likes routine. It's really helpful to get everything in that I want to and to not feel overwhelmed. So that's been working really well for me. My cravings for types of food is changing a lot. So I used to crave, I don't even know if it was a craving or if it was just all that I was comfortable with, but these high volume, low calorie, very filling foods, because that was what I was so used to eating for the last 10 years, basically. Now that I'm shifting what I'm eating and needing to eat more calorically, like there just isn't capacity for that amount of those foods anymore. Like you physically cannot live off of raw produce. You will explode if you still want to get all of your nutrients in. So I'm not craving that sort of really filling meal anymore. I'm not desperate to just like eat more and more and more. I really am craving things that are just more satisfying and just give me the energy that I need so I can get on with my life. Meals are not such a spectacle anymore. They're not such an event for me anymore. I don't need to plan my whole day around, well, how much time it is going to be, to put this meal together and then to sit down and eat it and need everything to be perfect, because who knows when you'll eat again, so you better make it good. Like that mentality is kind of gone now. So I'm using food more and more for fuel and then forgetting about it, for hours and hours at a time until it's time to eat again. And I don't know, this probably all sounds very, very basic to people, but this is not basic to me. I have never existed like this. I have never had this happen to me before. So it's cool. It's really cool. And it feels really different. And I think in the day to day, I forget how different this is until I do something like this and reflect back and think, even a few months ago, my life was nothing like this. So, okay, other physical things. My hair, I think, is thicker. I've been holding out for this. I'm like, oh my gosh, just like give me nice recovery hair. I just want I've always wanted just like big hair, and I don't know how big my hair will just be naturally, but this is like a huge vanity piece that I'm just like, I can hold on to hope that I can just like have healthier, thicker, better hair. And I think it's a bit better. I think it's a bit better than it was. My nails are definitely longer and stronger. So that's nice. I'm getting a bone density scan next week. So I'll find out if I've been able to reverse the damage that I had done to my bones. So I've had osteopenia for, several years, because that's when they last measured it. And that's essentially, you're not in osteoporosis area, but you're below normal in terms of your bone density, which is really not good. But luckily, it can be reversed. So I'm really hoping that all of this nutrition and everything that I've been doing has reversed that. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll find out next week that goes well. My skin, this one's a tough one for me because it feels more alive, certainly. You kind of get just like dry, dull, dead looking skin when you're really, really malnourished. And so that start to kind of come back online. But along with that has been some nice adult acne, which I have had before and is just a bit of a pain. If it just means that hormones are rebalancing and life's coming back into my various, organ systems and body systems, then fine. It's better than the alternative. I'd rather have living skin than not. But what it does to my brain is that I have this part of me that thinks, okay, well, if I have to be at this weight and I have to gain this weight, then everything else about me and my life has to be perfect as this like counterbalance to not being skinny. And that's something that I will be bringing up in therapy this week, because it's been something that's been on my mind is, optimizing the rest of myself to make up for the fact that I'm just not impossibly thin anymore. And that's a gross thing to say, but it's the way that I've been feeling. And so, I need to have perfect skin and perfect teeth and perfect hair, and because then it won't matter so much that I've had to gain this weight. So that's That when I say the mucky middle of recovery, this is exactly what I mean. It's you've still got this like thing on your shoulder just constantly kind of nattering at you what you ought to be doing, but you're pushing so hard to get away from that and to continue to do the right thing despite that, and then hoping over time that that sort of screaming that's going on, that tantrum that the eating disorder is going through, that will get quieter and that will eventually go away. So very much in the middle of it. Through the summer, I have sort of had these inadvertent challenges to the eating disorder come up naturally. When I was away, I went out to my family's place on the lake, and it forced me into a few different challenges. One being away from home, not having access to all of the different foods that I tend to eat here, and really being forced to work with what I had and what was more readily available and what more people would also be likely to be eating. And I found it less challenging than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was really going to ramp up my anxiety, but every time that I was giving myself a second thought about food where I'd be hungry or I'd be thinking about food, I would just tell myself the reason that you're thinking about food is probably because you're hungry. Honor that, honor that, honor that. And doing that over and over and being like, nothing bad is going to happen to you. Everything's going to be okay. Like really talking myself through this inner dialogue when in a somewhat unfamiliar context. I also was kind of forced into focusing on my own plate, as it were, focusing on my own journey, my own self, and not taking into account so much like what other people are eating, when other people are eating. When you spend a lot of time with, family or friends or things like that, it's really easy to get sucked into a comparison game. Like, oh, if they're not eating, why do I have to eat? And it used to drive me absolutely mental when I would have to eat and, the rest of my family or whoever I was with, like, wasn't also eating. It was like an internal rage. I can't even describe it. It used to make me so upset because it felt so unfair. And now I just stay in my lane. I'm like, oh, well, it's breakfast time for me. Nobody else is eating breakfast. That's fine. I have to. I don't have the option of sort of skipping meals and having that not be a big deal. I don't have that option because it sends me backwards. I have to have 3 square meals a day plus my snacks, and that's my reality. And other people might eat 1 time a day and sort of graze on snacks all day. And that used to drive me absolutely bonkers. But this summer, I've just been like, nope, it's time for me to eat. Go make my meal, not make a big deal of it, just like get it, go and sit down and do it and get it done and then move on with my life. So it's like, it feels crazy to be doing that and to not care so much and to not be so upset about it all of the time. So along with being around people for eating for myself, also just being around people that eat quite normally, or they eat normal things, or they eat normal meals, that's really, really been beneficial too. Like what do other people order at restaurants? What do other people eat when we're all just kind of like standing around? It's nice to be able to watch people and be exposed to what normal eating habits are. I am constantly looking for intuitive eating mentors. I'm like, if you are a very intuitive eater who does not have issues with food or your body and you eat what you like and it isn't a mental game for you, I'm like, please come for lunch with me. I'm like, hang out with me, show me how you live. Like, I just want to get there. And so I'm like, I need some inspiration of like normal intuitive eaters and how they exist. So I've still got a ways to go, obviously. This feels very much like in the middle, like I said, and it's difficult in a very different way. So rather than crisis mode and everything being terrifying and everybody being terrified, it's now being able to stay in the game long enough for these things to solidify. So this is sort of where the risk of, oh, look, she looks fine. She looks good. She looks different. Look how well she's doing. This is where this narrative starts. It's in the middle. And yes, things are generally positive. Physically, they're much different. They're much more positive. But my brain is still screaming a lot. Everything is still hard sometimes. And your eating disorder is not going to go down without a fight. It will scream and carry on until you extract each and every cell from it. Each and every part of you needs to be separate from it, and it will keep screaming until the very end. And it doesn't have to scream so loud at you when you're weak and malnourished and underweight, because you're easier to control when you don't have your senses about you. But as you start to recover and you start to come back online and you start to really see it for what it is, it has to scream a lot louder, and it hates that. And so it will do everything in its power to drag you back down. And so I'm experiencing that. I'm experiencing these insidious little pieces of it that are like, well, wouldn't it be nice to just come back a little, to keep a little bit of this? That would be fine. Nobody would know. And I'm not doing that anymore because I really, really want to get to the other side of this. I cannot wait. I can't wait. And so overall, I'm hoping that this next season can uncover a lot more of these important conversations, and I have tons and tons of ideas, and I have some really exciting guests coming on. And I think it's just going to be a more energetic season. I mean, for me, I always felt very energized by recording and things like that. I don't know if there will be any sort of discernible difference from the way that I'm showing up now to the way that I was. I know that my brain feels a lot more online. I know that I feel more clever. I don't know if that's actually true or if it's just a feeling. I also feel sillier. I feel more like me, I guess, or I'm figuring out more of me. And that's been quite cool and interesting to see how that's shown up and how that will continue to impact the people and relationships in my life and the rest of the things that I'm just so excited to do in the future. So I feel a lot of hope. In the same time, I feel very, very in the middle, but that's the game, man. That's what we're doing here. So that's a podcast. I'm excited to be back. I miss doing it. And a preview of some of the topics that we're going to cover this season, because I am so excited. I've been planning this. I've been planning so many cool things. We are talking about magic mushrooms. We are talking about yoga and veganism and eating disorders. We are talking about dating and sex. We are talking to guests with amazing stories, unbelievable stories. And we are also covering some controversial stuff as it pertains to eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. So keep your ears open, stay tuned for all of that. I committed to being completely transparent and authentic as I go through this in real time. And so with that comes talking about things that I'm encountering, which I think are, useless at best and potentially harmful at worst. So we got to talk about that stuff because it matters. So grab a coffee with your favorite plant-based milk or grab a snack because we have those now, and let's get back into it. As always, we are at uncoverypod.com and on Instagram. Leave us some feedback, reach out, let me know if there's anything that you want to hear about on the podcast, questions that you have, if you have any guests that you can think of, or if you have a story that you'd like to share yourself. There's places to put that on the website, and our DMs are always open. If you have Apple Podcasts, please go leave us a rating and a review. It means the world. The feedback is really, really helpful. I think you can do that on Spotify and other places now as well. So feel free to pop over to any of your podcast platforms and give us some ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it. I think that's it. We will see you on the next episode.